Minister Wu, your fellow ministers, excellencies representing Australia and the United States, and the European Union, other distinguished representatives of the Taiwanese government and people. It is a great honour for me to be here. It is a particular honour to have the opportunity to close this wonderful forum's proceedings with this speech this evening. Last week, Foreign Minister Wu spoke very frankly with the Australian people about the prospect of invasion that his nation faced. So I will do my best this evening to speak with equal candour. For a retired free world politician, there may be no more telling place to be right now than this, because here, liberty and tyranny are most at odds. Taiwan is a liberal democracy of almost 25 million people, now in peril, so what Australian Democrat would not rally to your cause? We have to assume that China is preparing to take Taiwan by force if necessary, because President Xi himself has said that, even though Taiwan has never been part of communist China and hasn't really been ruled from Beijing since 1895. But why would China be flying ever more menacing sorties against this island? And why would China be building a massive amphibious assault capability? And why would it be amassing batteries of carrier killing missiles if its plan were not to force the United States from the Western Pacific and to have the People's Liberation Army in charge here in Taipei? Now, I can hardly conceive of a more horrible prospect than a sea and air invasion of this island, preceded, as it almost certainly would be, by an ultimatum to the United States and its allies. And yet, isn't the alternative even worse? The subjection of a free people to a tyranny that brooks no opposition, no alternative sources of power, no independent thought, just ever more complete subservience to the Red Emperor, monitored and enforced by 24/7 electronic surveillance. Now, I am no military planner, but with Sun Tzu, imagine that Beijing would prefer to win without a fight. Beijing is already mixing intimidation with misinformation in the grey zone between peace and war. The campaign to take Taiwan has started. An invasion would be but the final consummation of Beijing's drive to put the so-called century of humiliation behind it. The steadily increasing sorties into Taiwanese air zones are designed to test your readiness, wear out your pilots and planes, and ultimately confuse you about the big exercise that might turn out to be a real attack. I imagine that these will increase and intensify and creep closer to Taiwan itself in the hope of provoking a reaction that would enable Beijing to claim that conflict was Taiwan's fault. Likewise, I'd expect the PLA Navy to start exercising in greater numbers closer to your shores. If it intimidates you into striking a deal, so much the better. Otherwise, again, the objective would be to build pressure and provoke an incident that could be blamed on Taiwan, along with the insistence that this was China's internal affair and no business of anyone else. I suspect that Chinese ships and planes will eventually come right up to the 12-mile limit. That's why it will be important for Taiwan's friends, the United States, Japan, Australia, Britain, and the Europeans regularly and in force to keep patrolling the Taiwan Straits to remind Beijing that these are international waters that it does not own. If sea and air intimidation doesn't produce the clash that China can claim is a casus belli, at some point I'd expect China to announce a blockade of the so-called rebel province and claim the right to intercept the ships and the planes carrying Taiwan's trade in the hope of making life here all but impossible. This would be the key moment for Taiwan's friends. Would they be prepared to run a Chinese blockade? And would China be prepared to intercept foreign ships and planes bound for Taiwan? My instinct is that China would be indeed reluctant to do so, but would instead challenge the United States and its allies to keep Taiwan supplied indefinitely. By that stage, the economic relationship between China and the US and its allies could long have ruptured, and the world could have divided into camps, essentially the democracies versus the dictatorships. Long before then, I imagine, there could have been cyber attack and counterattack, increasingly destructive, and Beijing might have mobilised any friends it has here to undermine Taiwan's will to resist. This is where Taiwan perhaps needs to be an Eastern Israel, capable of inflicting massive and asymmetric damage on any challenger. Rightly, Taiwan is preparing itself, but time might not be your friend, as the assumption that it's still years before China has the amphibious and the anti-submarine capability to prevail is only a comforting one if Taiwan and its friends are building their own capability even faster. Now, to the extent that there's a Biden doctrine post-Afghanistan, it's that America helps those who help themselves. And why not? Because no one could be expected to fight harder for Taiwan than you would be prepared to fight for yourselves. After seven decades of successful separation, I can't see the people of Taiwan ever willingly submitting to communist rule from Beijing. Conversely, I can't see Beijing ever accepting that Taiwan should be free. Beijing will say that Taiwan is no one else's business, and if other countries make it theirs, Beijing will say that it has no designs on anyone else. It is the old siren song that we all should recognise, as our Prime Minister has recognised from the 1930s. We have no further territorial ambitions. But that's not how dictatorships operate. And it's never been how Beijing operates. For millennia before communism, Beijing expected tribute from all under heaven. Marxism-Leninism has simply reinforced that age-old exceptionalism, and technology has simply extended Beijing's reach. Now, I can't think of a harder decision for an Australian government than the call to defend freedom far from home. Accept the call to defend freedom close to home, with weakened friends and stronger foes. Ladies and gentlemen, after 18 months of virus anxiety over the impact of COVID on our old and sick, the last thing anyone wants to contemplate is challenge from another quarter. But ready or not, China is coming for Taiwan's freedom, and the best way to avoid the war that no one wants is to be ready for it. These are difficult times, even daunting times. But the more we think things through, the better things will turn out to be. As I said this morning, this is a brave and a free people, and I am confident that the braver you are, the freer you will stay. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a real honour to be here. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister Abbott, for your insights. Thank you.